everyone, welcome back to the channel! If you're a fan of Family Guy, you know that the show doesn't hold back when it comes to pushing boundaries. Today we're diving into from murder to... well, let's just say some of these characters should probably be in jail right now. Stick around to find out why. Let's start with the main man himself, Peter Griffin. You'd think the worst thing he's done is being a terrible father, right? But oh, there's so much more. I mean, the guy once forgot Meg's birthday 3 years in a row. Can you imagine the heartbreak? He used Chris's college fund to buy a life-size statue of David Hasselhoff. Priorities, right? And don't even get me started on how many times he's put Stewie in mortal danger. But oh no, that's just scratching the surface. Peter's not just a bad dad. He's committed some pretty awful crimes that are somehow never addressed by the law in Quahog. It's like he's got a free pass. Seriously, what's up with that police department? Are they even trying? For starters, remember when he and his friends kidnapped and tortured that poor schmuck in Patriot games? Yeah, that's right. They went full-on criminal. He assaulted a dude over a football game just because he felt like it. And he didn't even feel bad about it. No remorse whatsoever. He just shrugged it off like it was another Tuesday night. No big deal, right? But the absolute worst thing Peter's ever done? Oh, you're not ready for this. Buckle up, because this one's a doozy. It's beyond anything you can imagine. In the episode Seahorse Seashell Party, Peter runs over a guy with a car. And it's not just a hit and run. And get this, he gets away with it. No consequences at all. The man was in the hospital, probably fighting for his life, and Peter just drives off. No questions asked, nothing. It's like it never happened. It's like the writers just forgot about it. How does he keep getting away with this? Lois Griffin may come off as the more responsible one in the family, the voice of reason in a sea of insanity. She's the one who keeps things from completely falling apart. But let's not forget, she's had her fair share of dark moments too. Moments that make you question her so-called sainthood. I mean, living with Peter Griffin for that long would make anyone crack eventually. It's almost a miracle she's held it together as long as she has. Remember the episode Lois comes out of her shell? Yeah, the one where Lois goes through a midlife crisis and starts acting like a teenager. It was like watching a completely different person. Well, during this little escapade, she has an affair with a train conductor. And we're not talking about some innocent flirting here, folks. I'm talking full-on cheating, making out on trains, sneaking around behind Peter's back, the whole 9 yards. It was a scandalous affair. And for a train conductor, no less. You'd think she'd at least go for the guy with the first-class key, but no, she went for the guy punching tickets. But honestly, that's not even the worst of it. There's more to her dark side. Lois has also been known to abandon her family when they need her the most, like that time she went on a cruise and left Peter in charge of the kids. We all saw how that turned out. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Peter struggled to keep things under control and chaos ensued. So yeah, Lois can be cold, manipulative, and, well, let's just say, not as saintly as she seems. She has a side to her that's far from perfect. She's like a walking contradiction. A loving mother who's also capable of some pretty terrible things. It's this duality that makes her character so fascinating and complex. All right, let's talk about Meg. Poor Meg. The character who seems to have drawn the short straw in every possible way. Honestly, I think it's safe to say that Meg doesn't really deserve all the bad things that happened to her. She's just a victim of the show's relentless cruelty. Week after week, the writers put her through the ringer, and for what? A cheap laugh at her expense? I mean, the writers put her through the ringer week after week, and for what? A cheap laugh? It's almost as if they take pleasure in her misery. Seriously, this girl can't catch a break. Every episode seems to bring a new form of torment for her. Her family treats her like dirt, constantly ignoring her or making her the target of their jokes. Her love life is a dumpster fire filled with rejection and heartbreak, and she's constantly the butt of everyone's jokes, whether it's at school or at home. It's enough to make anyone want to run away and join the circus just to escape the constant ridicule. But even Meg, the punching bag of Quahog, has had some dark moments in her own right. Moments that make you realize she's more than just a joke. In the episode I'm No Hero, she gets involved in a pretty messed up scheme with Peter. It's one of those episodes that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. You know, the one where they pretend Peter saved a bunch of people from a fire. It's a wild ride from start to finish. She actually manages to save a man's life, which is pretty heroic, showing that she's capable of great things. But then she turns it into a whole big publicity stunt, which kind of ruins the moment. She lets Peter take all the credit, basking in the temporary glory. and she even goes along with his ridiculous lies just to keep the charade going. Talk about selling out for 15 minutes of fame. It's a sad commentary on how desperate she is for any kind of positive attention. And who can forget that time she briefly considers joining a cult to escape her family's abuse? It's a drastic measure, but when you think about it, it's probably the most logical thing she could have done at that point. Which, when you think about it, is probably the most logical thing she could have done at that point. I mean, who could blame her? When your own family treats you like a joke, sometimes you have to take extreme measures to find some peace. I mean, who could blame her? It's a tough world for Meg Griffin, and sometimes you just have to find your own way out. Now, let's talk about Stewie, the tiny dictator with a British accent and a penchant for world domination. This kid is bad news, folks. I mean, he's only a baby, but he's already got a rap sheet longer than Peter's. Stewie's worst actions? Oh, where to begin? In the episode Patriot Games, Stewie and Brian get involved in to frame a group of football players. And we're not talking about some harmless prank here. We're talking about tampering with evidence, bribing witnesses, the whole shebang. But it's not just the schemes that make Stewie dangerous. This kid has a dark side that would make even the most hardened criminals shudder. In Lois Kills Stewie, Stewie flat out tries to. And it's not even a joke. He builds a freaking and nearly wipes out his whole family just to be in charge. I mean, talk about an overreaction. You'd think a timeout would be enough to deal with a fussy baby, but not Stewie. Let's be real here, folks. Stewie he tries to murder his family to take over the world. Brian Griffin, the voice of reason, if you can call it that. I mean, he's a talking dog who drinks martinis and dates human women. Not exactly the most stable foundation for a moral compass. Brian may be a dog, but he's done some too. And the worst part is, he tries to justify his actions with his pseudo-intellectualism and self-righteousness. Let's talk about the time That's right, you heard me correctly. In the episode Brian's a Bad Father, Brian just couldn't keep it in his pants. He goes behind his girlfriend's back and has an affair with and not just any cat, mind you, but a cat who's clearly out of his league. I mean, talk about hitting rock bottom. Oh, and let's not forget that time by sleeping with her. I know, Meg's not exactly the most popular girl in school, but she doesn't deserve to be taken advantage of like that, especially by a dog who's supposed to be her friend. Quagmire is next, and look, let's not beat around the bush here. Quagmire is epitome of bad decisions. He's constantly pushing boundaries, and he seems to take pride in being the most morally reprehensible person in Quahog. This is a guy who wears a turtleneck and a blazer to a family picnic, a guy whose catchphrase is giggity giggity giggity, a guy who has a hidden room in his house dedicated to, well, let's just say it's not suitable for daytime television. In one episode, Quagmire for a thrill, he doesn't even care about the woman's feelings. He just wants to see how much pain he can inflict before she finally snaps. But that's nothing compared to the time he kept a woman locked in his. And we're not talking about a short time. He kept her there for feeding her nothing but crackers and water and making her watch his collection of vintage pornography. And let's not forget about all the times he sexually harassed women, made inappropriate comments, and generally acted like a complete and utter creep. Let's move on to Cleveland. Now, Cleveland might seem like the calm, collected guy in the group, the voice of reason in a sea of chaos, but even he's made some in his life. I mean, nobody's perfect, right? Remember that time he moved to Virginia and got his own spin-off show? Yeah, that was a terrible decision, but I'm not here to talk about his career choices. I'm here to talk about his personal life, which is just as messy as everyone else's in Quahog. In the episode You May Now Kiss, the guy who receives, Cleveland gets married to a woman I'm talking about a woman who's rude, obnoxious, and just plain mean. And yet, for some reason, Cleveland falls head over heels for her. But the most unforgivable thing Cleveland did, his wife Loretta, after she cheated on him. Sure, it was a tough situation. I mean, nobody wants to be the victim of infidelity, but Cleveland's behavior after that was, he didn't take responsibility for his part in their broken marriage, and honestly, he kind of just let her without a second thought. Not the greatest move, Cleveland. And finally, let's not forget all of the other crazy, messed up characters in Quahog. I mean, this town is like a magnet for weirdos and misfits. It's like the island of misfit toys, but instead of toys, it's people. Take Tom Tucker, for example. He's the local news anchor, but he's also a raging alcoholic who once had talk about unprofessional, dude. You're on air. Millions of people are watching. At least try to hold it together until the commercial break. Then there's Mayor West, who, in his own bizarre way, I'm talking about tax fraud, embezzlement, and, well, attempted. But hey, at least he's got a catchy theme song, right? And who could forget about Herbert the Pervert? He's an elderly gentleman who has a thing for young boys, especially Chris. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. It's just wrong on so many levels. The list just goes on and on. Quahog is a place full of people who are selfish, greedy, and just plain mean. So there you have it. The worst thing every Family Guy character has done. And honestly, there are probably a few we missed because let's face it, this show is with terrible people making bad decisions. But hey, that's what makes it so hilarious, right? If these characters were real, they'd all be behind bars. Which character do you think deserves the harshest punishment? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and